Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Roxanne. If it's your first time here, then welcome. Today I want to talk to you guys about the next few books that I have read recently. I've been doing these in intervals of 5, but there is one that I don't have much to say about, so I'm gonna do 6 books in this one. So the first book that we're going to talk about is When They Call You a Terrorist, a Black Lives Matter memoir by Patrice Khan Cullors and Asha Bendel, with a foreword by Angela Davis. She's one of the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement and organization, so I went into this thinking that it was about her and about her founding of the organization and then the organization itself, and it's more a Black Lives Matter memoir, the concept of Black Lives mattering, as opposed to the organization Black Lives Matter, so keep that in mind. But this was still a very, very strong, very emotional, powerful memoir. Patrice goes into her life, the work that she's been doing, the activism that she's been doing since the age of 14, the type of education that she received, and the instances in her life which made her realize how different people of color, and very specifically Black people, are treated in the society, and that propelled her to become involved in different nonprofits and then ultimately to create some of her own. She talks about being a queer woman, the different intersections of her life, being Black, being women, being queer, growing up in a low-income community, and all of the things that influence her way of thinking and that feed into her ways of seeing the world and interacting with other communities and other people. And I think it was beautiful, and I think it was very powerful, and I definitely recommend it. Sometimes I thought that her sentence structure was a little bit awkward, where I feel like she could have said things in a clearer way, and I wasn't really sure why she sort of structured the sentence in the way that she did. But that's really my only negative to say about this. I think this is something that everybody should read. It's very informative, and it's very personal, which I really appreciated. Then I read volume 3 of Jiying Days. Not much to say about this one, except that I like that we get to see a little bit more of some of the side characters. The first story is about Ed, who is one of the side characters, and I really liked it because I really enjoy him as a side character, so it was great to see him sort of take center stage in that first one. And then in the other ones, it's just more great stuff about their friendship and their school days, and there's stuff going on with my ship that I am kind of freaking out about, so I can't wait to purchase the 4th one and see what goes on there, because I need to know. And I read The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and you guys might have seen this going around. I know it was in one of the recent book of the month. So this book is about an actress, Evelyn Hugo, who is super duper famous. She's since retired, and she reaches out, bless you, she reaches out to a newspaper or a magazine. She reaches out to a journalist, one very particular journalist, to write a story about her. She is hosting a fundraiser where she's going to sell the dresses that she's worn throughout the years, and the money's going to go to breast cancer, so she wants to talk about it, and she chooses one very particular journalist to speak to. No tell-all has been done about her, and so this is very exciting news. And the journalist goes and begins to speak with Evelyn, only to find that what she has been sold about Evelyn and what she has been told Evelyn wants to do isn't really what's going on with Evelyn, isn't really why she's been chosen to go and speak to Evelyn. So we begin to learn about the story of Evelyn Hugo, who she is. It has bisexual Latinx representation, which is amazing. It talks about what it's like to sometimes forget your heritage and your culture in the desire to fit into the larger society, to sell a certain part of yourself that may require you to forego parts of your culture and your heritage. And I think it's a great story about Evelyn, and it's a great story about the journalist, and within that there are great sub-stories about love, about the LGBT culture and its history in Hollywood, about bisexual erasure within the LGBT community, about remembering who you are as a person, and coming into who you are as a person. And I think it was great. I was enthralled in the story. I wanted to always be reading to it and listening to it and knowing what was going to happen next. In the end, I was shocked by the way that it ended, but not, I was and I wasn't at the same time. There were parts of it that shocked me, and there were parts of it that I saw coming, but they didn't, the fact that I saw those parts coming didn't ruin the story for me. If anything, it just made me curious to see how it would be handled. And there are a lot of very important topics that you almost don't even realize are going to be talked about when you go into the story, but when they are, I appreciated the way in which they were done. I don't want to talk too much about the specifics of the story, because I think this is something that the less you know about it going in, the more you'll like it and appreciate it. Evelyn Hugo is a character that you will love and hate at times because of the decisions that she makes, but you will understand her, and I think that's a great complexity to a character, that and you both sympathize and don't at the same time. It's a very complex emotion that I feel towards Evelyn, and I think that was very purposeful, and I think it just elevated the story, and I think that it was great. And the writing isn't overly emotive or flowery or complicated. It's very straightforward. It's very engaging. But if you're looking for a good story, good representation, and good discussions on different topics that we still need to do a lot of discussion about, then I would definitely recommend it. Then I listened to, actually, it was Before We Were Free by Julia Alvarez. You might have seen me talk about Julia Alvarez before. I read by her When the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accent, which I have here somewhere, and I really enjoyed it. And so this one is called Before We Were Free by Julia Alvarez. It's actually a middle grade story. It's about this 12-year-old girl named Anita who lives with her family in the Dominican Republic during the time of the dictatorship of Trujillo, and you get to see through her what it's like to be a family during that time, what it's like to for her as a young girl to learn about what's going on in her country, to learn about what's going on in her family, to be fed one thing through the government and through school, and then to see another in your family, and that conflict that a lot of these, that all of these families had to deal with, and how difficult that was for such a young girl. And you learn about how that affected the youth and families during this time in the Dominican Republic. And it was narrated by the author, which I really loved. I loved her narrative voice. If you have read either The Time of Butterflies, I believe it's called, In the Time of Butterflies, I believe it's called, by her, or if you've read How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accent by her, you will see them referenced in this story, which I really appreciated, and I thought was great, because there was a cohesiveness to the storytelling, which was so awesome to sort of recognize while I was listening to it, because I know what the In the Time of Butterflies is about, and I have heard, not in great detail, but I've heard somewhat about the actual historical instances that inspired that story, and then I have read How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accent. So to see those characters show up in the story, or to see them, to hear about them being referenced, was really fun. This is a heartbreaking story, but it's one that I definitely recommend, and it's not, I think it was written in a very sweet way for children to be able to understand the difficulties that were going on during this time, and that still happened. This is still a very relatable book, because the instances that she discusses and the history that she explores through the story is still the reality for a lot of kids and for a lot of families throughout the world. And so I really appreciated that she took such a difficult story and managed to tell it in such a beautiful way, and then and then I appreciate also how it's recent it still feels. Then I read a memoir by Sonia Sotomayor. Sonia Sotomayor is the first Latina Supreme Court Justice. She's from Puerto Rico, so that is very exciting. I feel very, very proud. And it is called My Beloved World by Sonia Sotomayor, and it stops about 20 years before she becomes a Supreme Court Justice, and she said that she did that because she felt that by that time the main core of who she is had been developed, and that is still who she is, and the experiences that she faced and she went through in the time that she discusses in her book are what feed who she is as a person still to this day, and who she is as a judge. I think also she wants to show people that there are more sides to her than just being a Supreme Court Justice, that there's a lot that went into her life to get her to that point. A lot of attention is paid to the fact that she is the first Latina Supreme Court Justice, and that it almost sort of overshadows everything else that she's done and been through. So I appreciated that she acknowledged that and that she decided to focus on that. We get to see such amazing cultural references. For me, it was great because she talks about going back home to Puerto Rico, what her family was like, the expectations that they had for her, how a lot of sometimes they didn't really understand why she did the things that she did, why she wanted to be a judge, why sometimes she took jobs that meant she got paid less, the difficulties that she had to undergo as a woman in law and as a Latina in law, and how she had to fight with this idea that some men, in particular men, had about her having it easy because of quotas that schools or organizations had to meet to have certain diversity, I guess meet certain diversity standards, and in thinking that they completely disregard all the hard work that she's done. And it was very personal, and it endeared me to her more. I already admired her, obviously, because she's the first Latina Supreme Court Justice and because she's the first Puerto Rican Supreme Court Justice, and as a fellow Puerto Rican that makes me very proud. But I appreciated that I got to learn more about who she was as a person, how much her culture means to her, and how much Ponce, my hometown, actually meant to her, which is always so exciting to see, and it gave me a little heart flutteries, all the feels. I definitely recommend it if you're looking to read about a powerful Latinx woman. By all means, please check that one out. The last is Conquistadora by Esmeralda Santiago. She is a Puerto Rican author. She wrote When I Was Puerto Rican, which is one of my favorite books of all time. That is a nonfiction memoir about her life. And so this one's Conquistadora, and this is about a Spanish girl initially named Ana, who finds out that she was related to some of the original conquistadores of Puerto Rico, so the Spaniards that came to conquer Puerto Rico, and she sort of begins to romanticize all of that, which is one of my one of my big issues with her, and one of the author's issues with her. Everything in this book I felt was very purposeful. Nothing was done by accident, I don't think. Ana embodies a lot of the qualities in female characters that readers love. She's strong-willed, she is stubborn, she does what she thinks it's right, she is soft-hearted at times, she's a great heroine, but at the same time, Esmeralda Santiago never ever lets you forget that at the end of the day she is a conquistadora, that she's there for selfish reasons. She is never really referred to as a conquistadora within the story, but I find it very important that the title of the book itself is Conquistadora. That means that the author never wants you to forget that. Despite how you may feel towards Ana as a person, her emotions and her personality, she is still doing something that is harmful to the island as a whole. And there's a resentment there that Esmeralda Santiago weaves into the story and never lets you forget about. The story is about Ana growing up, finding a way to come to the island, becoming a plantation owner, and trying to grow her plantation and her business, and how her love for the island and its people grow. And it's her life. It's about her life, but it's also about the history of Puerto Rico. It's also about the effect that the Spanish had on Puerto Rico. It's about the slaves that were kidnapped and brought to Puerto Rico. It's about the people who were born of them in Puerto Rico, and how they wanted so much to find that freedom and that liberty and that autonomy, and the resentment that is felt towards Spain and towards other conquistador nations. And it is all done through Ana's story, but Ana is a tool by which Santiago tells all of these stories. I saw one of the reviews on Goodreads, and it said, I wish that the author had just focused on Ana and not talked about any of the other characters. And I think that's to do a disservice to the story and to Esmeralda Santiago as a writer, because that wasn't the point. Ana is the tool by which you learn all of these other stories. You get to see all sides of the story of this history by using Ana as a tool, because every other chapter or so is told through the point of view of someone that Ana encounters. So you hear about different slaves, you hear about the manager of the plantation, you hear about her husband and his family, and you hear about her and her helpers and everything like that. And all of that weaves a story together about Puerto Rico. And it is not really about Ana, it's about what she represents and what her people and her story represents within Puerto Rico's history as a whole. That is essentially what this book is about. And it took me a while to realize that, because at times I was like, why her? Why are we learning about her? Yes, I like parts of her as a character, and there's a queer component to her story which I loved as well, but why? You know, why her? And once I got to the end, I realized that she is just a tool by which we learn about Puerto Rico. And there is something that happens in the end of the book that really sealed the deal for me, because it was one last final victory over this horrid history that Puerto Rico has over it. So it's like one final victory. It's one thing that Puerto Rico takes back, and it really just kind of all fit into place for me. I really ended up enjoying this more than I thought I was going through. About halfway through, I was like, okay, like I really want to like the story, but like I kind of need more. And when I got to the end, it all fit and I got it, and I was like, okay, this is a more powerful, this is a much more powerful story than I thought it was going to be initially, and that I thought it was going to be once I started as well. And yeah, I mean, I think Esmeralda Santiago does something brilliantly, and you can just really feel the love that she feels for Puerto Rico, and it just seeps through every single page. And I think that's obviously what I connected with most. So I will say that I might be biased in that, because that is the love that I feel for my island. So overall, I love this. I thought this was great, and if that sounds like something that you might be interested in, please pick it up. Those are the last 6 books that I have read. As always, thank you for watching and for listening. Let me know if you have read any of these and what you thought, if you plan to read any of these. As always, love you guys.